Awesome.
Yeah, so we are live at long last. I'm here with my friend Rick. Rick, how you
Good
doing?
evening, my friend. Good to see you.
Thanks for taking the time. And I met you through Enoch, aka Fawaz. Great
Hmm.
guy, great guest, amazing.
Yeah, awesome, dude.
So
Great
cool.
dude. I have the privilege to call him a friend because he is doing some pretty amazing stuff, and he's a solid man all around. Not even just as the Catholic guy. He's just a solid, good man. So yeah, great dude.
Amazing. So any friend of his is a friend of mine. So
We'll see after this interview. We'll see. I don't know. That's some pretty
after
bold statements.
after you tell me all your deep dark secrets, we'll
Mm.
see. We'll see.
Yep, we'll see how that goes.
So the way my interviews work, I ask the guest to go way back to even before the age of reason, where you were like pre 7 years old, but you had the impression, okay, there's a man in a robe, it's like incense, like there's a church, there's this talk of God and prayer. My mother's teaching me how to pray. Some of the early impressions that you had, the earliest impressions you had. And then, of course, when you reach the age of reason and you start thinking for yourself and you go through puberty and all that kind of stuff, and maybe you stray from God, you come back. Tell us the whole story, warts and all.
Okay. I mean, earliest memories of the church were just a big old building where we went every week. Probably the earliest recollection I could have from going to church at that time. I used to think the body and blood was snack time. That was my big thing. I used to think, oh, it's snack time for that, and that was kind of like the general impression I got from mass and going to mass and so forth. And then going up after my parents divorced, I used to go to church with my father a lot, and really after first communion and then confirmation, my father told me, "You're an adult in the Catholic Church. You can continue to go or not go," and I did. It was just something I did. And it wasn't out of a sense of obligation. It was kind of a sense of just kind of going to do and continuing to go through. And so as I did all that, and up through high school, continue to go into college, continue to go, even though looking back on it, it would have probably been better if I didn't go to church because my 20s were very hedonistic, and fallen away would have actually been a kind term to put on me. And I have no problem saying these kinds of things, but I did all kinds of awful activities, and I'm gonna have to, as they say at the four final things, your life is going to be, in a movie theater, it's going to be projected for everyone to know, and everybody's going to know everything. I would do all these awful things, and I would still receive our body and blood of our Lord, without a second thought. And so I did this throughout my 20s. Somehow, by the grace of God, I met my wife at the age of 27. We got married, and not until early 30s did I actually become Catholic. We'll just say it that way. Actually start practicing and actually start becoming an actual Catholic. And so that was something I'm still working through as the age, at the ripe old age of 41, still trying to, and no, none of us ever get there, ever to perfect being a good Catholic. There's, the just man sins 7 times a day. And just growing in faith and becoming the better man that I was supposed to be. But for the longest time, it was, my parents tried. They went to church and everything, but once they got divorced, it was kind of very difficult to kind of keep that ship together, as anybody would know, because it's hard to practice those kinds of things in the midst of all of that. And up until this point, that's really, it's not the most intriguing. There's no life altering stories. It was just the grace of the Holy Mother to kind of scoop me up and take me back, and then eventually start going back to church. And even to this day, I find things that I continue to have to improve on.
Yeah, for sure. we're gonna dig in a bit deeper into you and your faith, but I wanted to ask a little bit about your sibling. Do you have siblings? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do have siblings. I am the youngest of three. I have an older sister and an older brother. So that's kind of how
Where are they at with the faith journey, if you're comfortable?
uh, they're, let's just say they're falling away. They are, they continued the path that was laid out in front of them after my parents' divorce.
Okay. The sort of the rock and roll lifestyle you were into, they did dabbled in that stuff too, probably.
I think they're actually better at it than I am, to be honest. And that's not a dig. It's just that they I don't know. I can't speak for them. So I don't
Okay. Yeah,
really,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah. I don't want to get you in trouble either, but
I wouldn't worry
I'm
about
just curious. I'm just curious, with family, because Satan hates the family. That's why I always ask about family,
that. Mm-hmm.
because Satan hates the family and he'll do anything to undermine the authority of the father or to get a divorce or separation or to put the kids on sex, drugs, and rock and roll or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
It works like a charm because those things are tasty, right? Like
Yeah.
the sins of adolescence is very appetizing.
Especially in American modernity, American culture, it's seeped in every aspect you can find. Name your deadly sin out of the seven, and it's somewhere in whether it's sloth, pride, gluttony, lust. It's a swipe away. It's, technology has enabled those sins to be at your fingertips whenever you want. So it's a difficult journey for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. I was just thinking back to my adolescence and just embarrassed thinking about it. So, anyway, I'll get off that topic. But I want you to dig in a little bit to your first really hard hitting, honest confession because you were doing blasphemous communions and stuff like that. Apparently, what was it like to unburden yourself of some pretty dark sins, but especially the sin of taking communion when you weren't in the state of grace. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how did you get the courage, and did you pray a lot? Were you nervous? Did you try to go and then delay and procrastinate? Like, because that's what people usually do.
At the time, the reversion I was in, the best of my knowledge, I was so on fire with getting myself right that I wasn't afraid to confess that particular sin. There were other sins that were much worse in my estimation that I eventually got around to confessing, but that one was something that I felt like I needed to get off my chest as soon as possible, as soon as I realized it, because of the gravity of it.
Yeah, but it is kind of like you said. It is kind of like a technical sin. Like it's like, oh, I did a blasphemous communion. It's like it's not as embarrassing as some of the sexual sins, for example, and stuff like that. I know.
Yes.
You know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. That one is kind of like I was really dumb and I took advantage of this precious gift. Like even to this day, my friend, I will not receive unless I get to confession right before church. I know some
Cool.
people go to confession and then like a day later they'll go to communion. Not me. I am in such a, not paranoia, but in such a state of reverence
Yeah.
for what is the I can't say it, but transubstantiation that takes place in front of me, that he is there, that I dare not approach
Nice.
without, being as close to confession as possible.
Amazing.
So I
Yeah.
won't, yeah,
That's cool. I
I,
wish we had more of that. I wish we had more of that. You know, this sounds like I'm boasting or whatever, but when I go to my local parish or whatever, it seems like I'm the only one bugging the priest. Like I have to go up actually and ask, like, hey, can I confess my sins? And
you,
it's weird.
on that topic, speaking of confessors, and this is no way me trying to slander them, but there definitely is levels of confessors. I had the privilege last week or 2 weeks ago to have an amazing priest really just help me out and reveal to me um different ways to strive to be the best man I could be. And the confessor I went to last night, he's my local one. He's right up the street. He's a good man. He's not a bad priest. And he's admitted in homilies that confession is probably the most difficult thing for him to do. And so he's very much, I'm sure people in the audience will know, and it's not a slight against him because he's still fulfilling his duties. He's like, God, thanks you for coming, and offer up in prayer, do 3 Hail Marys, and I offer you pardon and peace, and then he gives you the absolution, right? He kind of just gives you the I don't want to say basic, but he doesn't like the confessor I had before is like, all right, you need to do this. You need to do this to kind of fight back against this sin, and you need to do this to offer up this, and so it's definitely difficult for Catholics around to find good confessors. Like I said, the priest up the street, very good man, very good priest, just different levels of that sacrament being performed. You can definitely see a difference.
Yeah, I've had bad experiences. For me, the worst experience in the confessional is when they're too chatty, like, I mean, and
Yeah.
finger wagging. Like, I mean, it is quite rare, but I've met a couple. There was this one Irish guy, I won't name him, but he had the gift of the gab, and the lineup, like, I mean, I was, at the time, I was volunteering as an altar server, and it's like, I had to interrupt him, like, excuse me, Father, I have to, I have to get to work here.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lineup outside, and like it's like it takes like, I don't know, 15-20 minutes per person.
Yeah, that's frustrating as well. That's also the people that are using it as therapy sessions instead of being like, I need this, I need that. I
Right.
did this, I did this, I did this. Also, here in the US, I don't know if you guys have them up there. We have like jokey. I've had
Oh,
jokey ones who are like, "Oh, don't
oh,
worry, ha 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 ha," and it's
oh.
like I've been like, "Yeah, I get you're trying to lighten the mood, but this is not really a time or place." And I'm the kind of guy that does that. I use jokes almost to a fault, but sometimes you're like, can we just kind of get turn this back to where we need to be, and that's the frustrating one for me.
Oh, oh, yeah. I would not go back to that priest for sure. That would just make me so uncomfortable. But today I went before Mass, and the priest was from India and had a thick,
Hmm.
thick accent, but he was solemn and grave, and
Yeah,
he thought about his advice, and I appreciated his advice, and you know, the main thing I want is the absolution, but it is nice also to get a little bit of advice, just a little bit of, and it's nothing earth shattering like every Christian knows, but you just to be reminded of the essential sort of core of your walk with God, and striving for virtue. Like, it's just a couple of words, but it's like, oh yeah, yeah, that's it, you know?
I find that a priest needs to step in. Yes, granted, we desire the absolution, but I think it's very good when a priest detects that you're starting to get into habitual,
Yeah,
and that's when they need to step in and be like, all right, this is what you need to do to break out of that. It could be something as simple as, hey, every time you whatever, say a decade, or stop trying to do it on your own, offer it up to God, or whatever the case may be.
yeah.
If you're struggling with it over and over and over again, yeah, you can either have the priest give you absolution, be like, try to do better next time, which is fine, right? Which is fine. Or you can have a priest that says, listen, maybe try this, maybe try that. Once again, it doesn't have to be a 15-minute dissertation. It can just be something like, hey, next, try this. And I think that's something that's very helpful as well.
A friend of mine told me that a priest told him, I don't want you in here confessing that same sin again. I want you to tackle it, beat it. Don't come back here with that same sin. I'm sick of hearing about it. I thought that was a bit much. I thought that was crossing a line. But
I mean, yeah, that could be some people. Some people react well to it, though. Some people react well to that kind of,
tough love.
challenge, if you will.
Tough
And
love.
but I do get if he's not giving you a way to beat it and just saying don't do it again. Yeah, that might be a little bit. That's not very helpful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like one of my life hacks, one of my little Catholic life hacks is when today the priest gave me 5 Our Fathers, and my life hack is I always add on one Our Father for the priest who gave me absolution. So I just said to him right away, okay, I'll do 6-1 for you. So he just appreciated that. And they do appreciate that. Like, I mean, I don't know if
Mm.
you know how lonely and sad it is being a priest in the modern world, but a lot of these guys are sad and lonely. I don't think this guy was sad and lonely, but if you're a true bride of Christ as a priest, I don't think it's sad and lonely. But the problem is that there are mediocre priests and they are sad and lonely. That's why they're going to gay bars and stuff. You know?
Yeah, there's a whole there's a whole thing about that. There's definitely the influences of modernity trying to make their vocation, which has stood the test of time for centuries, almost an afterthought or antique or something that's quaint and not fit for the modern world. And that's what our adversary wants. Our adversary wants, to think that it's passe or it's out of date or it's just not up to speed or it's left behind. And unfortunately, it's a generation of weak-willed men who do not stand up for the values of the church and to debate and like, listen, this is my vocation, this is what I do. Just you can lay the same burden on husbands, bad husbands who don't stand up and take pride in their vocation as well. And so it's that definite plague of weak-willed men that have been weakened by all the fat indulgences that we have at our fingertips, like we said before.
Absolutely. So, I'm not a huge fan of, we were talking about this before, of the online Catholic community. I find it a bit toxic on the left, on the right. I don't like any of it, but and you do find good content and it warms the cockles of my heart. But there's a lot of mixed bag stuff on the left and on the right. And one of the things on the right is this men's movement, and I think there's something very good in there. And I think even Enoch and you probably are on this trip with the men's, making manly men or make men great again or whatever it is. It is definitely a deficiency in our society, like you just mentioned, and it needs to be tackled. And I admire you and I applaud you if you're involved in that sort of work. Um, and I've got nothing negative to say about that, but I just want to ask you, what's your perspective? Are you involved actively in sort of trying to build up men? Because I think Enoch may have mentioned that.
I would guess I would say I am. There's two things that I do. One is my apostolate, if that's the right term. I'm not trying to say apostate, apostolate, called the Armed Catholic here in these United States. We like our firearms, and we have things that we can trace back to English common law, castle doctrine, and so forth, that are very much a hot topic. And in our state constitutions, like I'm coming to you from Texas. Texas has its
Okay.
own charter document. And in it is Article 1, Section 25, which talks about the right to keep and bear arms for your defense. Like it hated, it's in the charter document, and people have the access to use it. And so here in America, there are a lot of bishops. There's, your left cats that are saying you can't use them. They're bad. They're this, they're that. And the whole core of my apostolate is to say the church is taught through popes, through saints, that you have the right to self-defense. Now, that does include the use of a firearm. I am not going out and telling you to be an action hero. I'm not telling you to go be a vigilante. The church does not promote vengeance. The church does not promote any of those things. But if you and your wife and your children are threatened here in Texas or wherever I go across the union, it is your obligation as a man to defend your wife and kids and yourself, because we believe in birth to natural death. Nobody on this planet has the right to take your life from you. So I just try that virtue of defend, what Chesterton says, you defend the ones you're behind, you fight for the ones behind you and not the ones in front of you and all that kind of stuff. So that's one part. Yeah, that's my personal apostolate. I've also joined this thing called the Martyrs Walk, which we've just started testing out, where we're trying to see if we can put men through a virtual martyrdom, not a real one, obviously, but just a test to see how strong they are when faced with the challenges of modernity. because it has made us fat. It has made us lazy. It has made us separate from God. And we can see that in the very doughy midsections and lazy attitudes and entitled attitudes that a lot of men have. They don't want to be leaders. They don't want to have kids. They don't want to do all these things. They want to sit and they want to binge, your Netflix or whatever it is, and you want to just consume food or Marvel movies or whatever the case is, and just be selfish in your own little bubble. And because they've done that, the world has been allowed to crumble around them because nobody wants to assume their position on the wall and defend it. So that's as much as I am. Like, I am not online fighting people, with this thing or that thing. I kind of have my little niche, my niche. That's what I do. I talk about guns and Catholicism. Maybe if you want to talk like about movies or pipe smoking or whatever the case may be, stuff like that. But I don't like to I am not one that's posting, your sins are this, your sins are that, quoting Bible verses or whatever. There's much smarter men that do that, and I'm not one of them. So
I'm not much of a manly man, but I did get this shirt because my podcast is called CVS, so it's called I'm a CVS
yes.
warrior. But I think it's for the cyclical vomiting syndrome. I think that's what it stands for. But I just bought the shirt because my podcast is CVS, and I get in a lot of trouble with my American guests because that's like a pharmacy chain down there, CVS.
It's actually from I'm from the state of Rhode Island. It's actually headquartered in my home state where I was born, CVS. So that's why I was like, CVS podcast. Okay. Well,
Is it a good drugstore, or is it a crappy one, or
drugstore? I mean, they're all the same.
In the rankings, like, where does it fall?
Oh. I guess it's good. I mean,
Yay.
Yeah, they have. Oh, yes, because it's CVS, it's the best. It's the absolute best.
They have the longest receipts. I've heard that they have the longest receipts. That's what I've heard.
I'm pretty sure if you get a receipt, it can go as far as the moon. Maybe. I don't know. Possibly. Yeah, so, they are very long. They are very, very long.
I heard that Taylor Marshall, I'm not a fan. I heard that Taylor Marshall's running for president. Is that true? Is that true?
Anybody can announce that they're running. You'll know if he files the actual paperwork, if he actually puts a pack together and do a lot of people. And I'm not saying Marshall is doing this, both on the left, the political left and the political right. We'll have a lot of people that will announce, because you're a year out from the primaries. The primaries don't really start until 2023, 2024. I don't even know what year it is. They'll start in 2024. And so people announce now, it gets them some publicity. People will be like, oh, look, this guy's running for president. And then maybe they'll do some interviews and do some rounds and get their name recognition. Politicians do this all the time, like senators or governors of our states. I'm running, and then they'll make some interviews, and then this primary, like, oh, I'm not, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then they bounce out. But now they always get to say, oh, well, I ran for president in 2024, former presidential candidate. So that's kind of like another thing they can add. I'm saying this for the third time. I don't think Marshall is doing this. I'm just saying this is a trend people have done in the past. Is that what he's doing? I don't know. We'll see if he files and puts the pack together and makes appearances and do all. If he does, he does. And good for him. I mean, hey, it's America. If you want to run for president, Trump ran, so as anybody can.
Yeah. Did you like his town hall thing on CNN? Because that's making the rounds.
Americans love that kind of stuff because we're so tired of, at least people on the political right, of being lied to. And it really is wish fulfillment for a lot of us that we could talk back to these people who are just feeding this constant train of negativity at us about how bad you are and how this and that and this narrative is great and this group is better than you and this, that. It's just kind of real wish fulfillment to see that take place.
Some sticks poking in the cogs of the great machine.
Yeah. I mean, the machine's going to machine no matter who's there. But if somebody can make it a little bit more uncomfortable for them, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, there's this young Catholic guy that I kind of like. He's controversial. Nick Fuentes. What do you think about him?
Fuentes. Um, I actually have never, outside of a couple minutes on Timcast, and he's on with the Pearly Girl now every once in a
Yeah, yeah.
while. I saw. I mean, he just kind of spits back the same basic like manly man talking points that a generation of men just want to hear. I don't know. I think there's a lot of dudes here in these United States who use those talking points, kind of like the president thing. They elevate their profile. Do they really believe it? Are they doing any good? I don't think so. So I like, but then again, I have to caveat that with saying I've never really listened to him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you saw the whole yay thing with Trump and all that. That was whatever. It was what
Yep.
it is. But
For a magical moment when the stars all lined up. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's much hope that that Ye's going to do anything. But I wasn't really impressed with his intelligence. That's the first time I really paid attention to him, and he didn't seem too bright. He seems like a nice guy, but not too bright. But I think Nick is bright, but he's too obsessed with the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. Like he thinks the Jews are running the world, and it's like, who cares? Like, I mean, someone's got to run it. Who cares if if it happens to be the Jews?
He definitely has an E. Michael Jones strain in him at times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Speaking of E. Michael Jones, what do you think of the alleged apparitions at Medjugorje?
I like to refer to myself as a back pew Catholic, where I go to church and I listen to the priest and I read my Bible and I do my rosaries. And outside of that, I really don't pay attention to a lot of this stuff. So,
Cool.
People I trust say that it's no bueno, it's no good.
Yeah.
Much smarter men than I have said it's no good. And outside of that, I haven't done that much exploring about it. So, I mean, if you want to explain it to me, that'd be great.
No. I'm throwing out random sort of things, see what sticks here. But another thing I want to throw at you randomly. It seems like you're a cool guy because you're not too into the current thing. You know the current thing?
Man, you know what my current thing is right now? I got 5 quail that I'm raising in my house. Because with food and all this other kinds of stuff and disruptions, homesteading is a big thing right now. And quail, they're tiny, they're not that noisy. They do a lot, they poop a lot, which I'm having to clean up.
Fertilizer.
But I'm trying to like farm them and create them for their eggs. They're tiny eggs, but they're just as delicious as chicken eggs, and they're actually, they have a lot of protein and they're more yolky. But just trying to act more sustainable, trying to make my life more sustainable. Like that's what I'm into right now. I'm
Cool.
researching quail hutches and how to like feed them and keep them hydrated. And the other thing I do is I'm constantly brushing up on firearm technique and stuff like that, because that's part of my apostle. I teach these classes and stuff like that, so I'm always trying to brush up on that. No, I don't know, man. The current thing is so boring. Because it's just a cycle. Whatever the current thing is at the moment, brother, it'll be gone in 2 days, or it'll be gone in a week. So why get invested in any of that kind of stuff?
It's just 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Don't worry about it.
Whatever, right? So
yeah, I'm not allowed to talk about my favorite pet peeve. I'm not allowed to talk about it because I've been banned from YouTube a couple times for talking about
the thing.
I would love to talk about it, but I'm not allowed to talk. I found out the hard way. I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Well, you guys went through it a lot more intensely than we did. So
yeah, I was physically assaulted in a Catholic church because I went in without a passport. So, and my bishop told me to go in without a passport. He told me. You are not to be turned away. You're a Catholic. You're not to be turned away. He said, next time go in and talk to the priest. So next time I went and talked to the priest, and I got 6 cops and 2 security guards and whatever. It's just like nightmare.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's just a perfect embodiment of the West right now.
Worldliness in the church. I'm not, we've always known there's corruption. We've always known there's corruption in the members of the church. It's not a surprise, It's not a surprise to anybody.
Well, my favorite phrase when people try to say, I'm like, the church is infallible. People running it aren't, but the church is infallible. The men that run it are certainly fallible, are certainly sinful, but the teachings are, they're eternal. But unfortunately, we are the ones who have to discharge it, so it's gonna go off the rails at some point.
Do you have, so you have this these two sort of projects, apart from your farming and all that, but so are you physically meeting with the guys in real life? Like, is that something that's not happening online?
For the Martyrs Walk,
Yeah, the Martyrs Walk and then the gun stuff.
the Martyrs Walk, I flew out to North Carolina and we did a beta test of it, me and 6 other guys. So we went in and we did the whole thing, and I'm not at liberty to say what we actually did, but we did the physical activities, and I flew back last week. And so, because one person's from the West Coast, 2 of us are here in Texas, another person is from the Northeast, we do have to do some virtual stuff.
Okay.
But the first actual real one's in August, and the hope is all of us will fly back out to North Carolina for that. So we'll actually do that stuff in person. The gun stuff is if people, I've gone to a couple places. I'll fly out to different dioceses if they want me to, which, talking about running, I run into a lot of problems because a lot of dioceses are on the leftist side, at least run by their bishops, and they don't want anything to do, even safety training and talking about just Catholic principles. Once you mention a firearm, they don't want anything to do with me. So I've been rejected a couple times just because of the political stance that some people believe in it. So that one's taking a little bit more time to get actually off the ground.
Yeah. Well, it's highly charged, political. It's been politicized, weaponized, whatever. I guess it's an ironic term to say the gun issue has been weaponized, but it has.
You know what, my friend? I think it's perfect. I think it's perfectly. It's the best way to say it.
So, I know you're not an expert on Catholic just war theory, but I'd like to get your opinion on it because it's something that weighs heavily on my mind. Ever since the fall, there's been war, and it's usually pretty disgusting. It would be nice if we only engaged in just wars. Do you have opinions on war and the Catholic theory of just war, or even just an intuition about, can you unravel, like, are you able in your own life when you read the news to say this is totally corrupt, this business over in South America, or this business over in the Middle East, or this business in Ukraine? Do you have an intuition like this is just total money laundering, and this one's all about the oil, and that one's about whatever?
Well, the one in Ukraine, I've always referred to the Ukraine as like the Chinese restaurant of the world. And that's an old mafia term where they just take the money and they funnel it through and it gets distributed to all the parties. I mean, if you look at the amount of money the U.S. has been just faxing over, essentially, that you can't fax over $1 trillion here, $500 million, $1.5 billion here, blah, 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 without that money being laundered and going to somewhere. My radical opinion is we haven't had that. I don't think these United States has actually ever engaged in a just war. And that might be very controversial to a lot of people because of WW1, WW2. But the fact of what is used in those conflicts, thinking about it, if you want to talk about the gas and the chemical warfare that was unleashed in World War I, and I don't care if you have 100 priests come out and tell me that I'm wrong. Once you drop atomic weapons, especially, I think it was Okinawa. The second one was was a Catholic predominant city. I mean, if you always look at the pictures, that the cathedral still stands. In whichever it was Nagasaki, whichever it was, either the second one that got bombed. But that completely wipes out any kind of just war theory. The idea of being actually threatened and not national interest threatened, which is the way the security state uses. Oh, well, our interests, whatever. My interests here in Texas is not rooted in the Ukraine or rooted in Afghanistan or rooted in any of these other places. It's here. It's in my community and in my state, which is being overrun right now. If we want to talk about national interest, my state is being overrun by illegal immigration, but yet we're not doing anything about that here. There's the Justice Bellow portion of it, which I think is the just act or the reason to go to war. yeah, I think there's a couple things that has to be a direct threat, and it's up to the head and all this other stuff. Don't think any war we've engaged in has been unjust. And the fact of the matter is, and people won't like it, but the whole proportionality aspect and the fact that it is a thin line, but at the same time, the teachings of the church are eternal, and you can get through conflicts. I mean, let's just take World War II. The Japanese, before the bombs were dropped, offered to surrender multiple times, but because the United States interest, they wanted to get rid of the actual emperor. They wanted to erase that entire cultural system. That's why they dropped it. So that's why the United States is in direct violation of just war theory right there, because they had multiple opportunities. I mean, because just war says as soon as, and I try to use it a little bit when I talk about firearms and self-defense. You can kind of boil down just war theory into a personal defense philosophy. Like as soon as the threat is eliminated or neutralized or whatever the case, as soon as they give up, it's over. The fight's over. It's done. You do not have the right to shoot more rounds into somebody if they're down, or stab them if they have given up, if they've stopped their aggression towards you. Because the only point of violence, and this is what people don't get when I say I'm the armed Catholic, the only point of violence is to repel violence, is to push back against violence. You never instigate. There's no Catholic teaching that allows you for a premeditated assault on somebody, right? We don't have that right as Catholics, because we do not violate people's rights that way. We use force when necessary to repel an overpowering force that threatens to harm us. Same thing country wise, and I think we'd be a lot better off if we actually adhered to just war theory. But billions of dollars and billions of dollars is being funneled to massive weapons corporations and things of that nature, and it's one of the things that keeps the world running is constant violence. That's why when they left Afghanistan, they needed a new playground. They actually called Afghanistan the sandbox in military terms, because it was a great place for them to test out their weaponry, great place to harden out their troops, and like they were just shooting at caves. They were just blowing up caves, man. But now they needed a new sandbox. They needed a new play place. And of course, right after they got out of Afghanistan, now we're funneling weapons and bullets and tanks and all these other things to the Ukraine. That machine never stops. Complete and total violation of just war theory.
It's sick. It's a sick, demonic world we're living in. My eyes were kind of open. I was ignoring mainstream media my whole life, basically until 9/11, 9/11. Then I'm like, what is this? Like, something's wrong here, right? It didn't take me long to realize I was fishy, very fishy. And then, so when this latest thing happened with the forced, that was extremely fishy. I just didn't buy any of it. So yeah, it's sad. It's sad to think about the corruption, because I think of it really in terms of corruption and just sort of competing mafias, and I mean, the people who are corrupt, they love money, they love power, they love pleasure, they love, I mean, they're all good things that they love. Obviously, these are the gifts of God, but they're not in their proper proportion, in their proper place. And like, just because I like candy doesn't mean I can steal the candy from your kid or whatever, you know what I mean?
You are entitled to that candy. Yes, you
Yeah.
are, because you want it.
But I really laugh when it comes to the green movement, the ecological movement, and I'm not some kind of right-wing nut job, but we all like clean water and clean air and stuff like that. But
Shockingly enough,
yeah, but it's a bit absurd, the so-called reasoning, and the guilt trips that are foisted on the little people at the bottom of the power pyramid. Like, I mean, it's just absolutely laughable. It's a joke to me. I know it's a big deal down in the States. It's one of the talking points, and it's one of the, us versus them thing. And, there are always two sides, and it's always like 49, 51%. It's always just like perfect opposition that's set up, and it's like a motor that drives your economy or whatever.
It's all part of the the World Economic Forum, if you're into that whole thing. ideology. And of course, I don't think anybody's like, yeah, give me the dirtiest water possible. I love that smog. Ooh, yeah. Um, but this idea that is, once again, we can use the term weaponized to divide people. All of these policies, people tend to look at them in terms of race and all these other things when they really need to start looking at them in class.
Yeah.
All of these policies are meant to separate the betters, the elites, from us plebs, because these elites, they don't, and you could pick right or left on the political spectrum. They all are, and I always used to say is their houses are always going to be heated, their plates are always going to be full.
Yeah.
They're never going to suffer under any of the things that they seek to implement on us. And I hate to go back to it because you can be like, shut up about it, but something like gun control, right? Where they're like, here in the States, it's a big fight right now over stuff like that. It's a class system because those people at the top don't have to suffer through the permits and the payments and the hoops that they have to jump through for people at the bottom. And you could apply that same mentality to environmentalism, to whatever else. That it's really, the way I look at it, the way my eyes have been opened up, it is a war between your elites, your bourgeoisie, whatever you want to call them, your lizard people, if you're really into that kind of thing, if you're like an Alex Jones guy, and the rest of us.
Yeah.
Because to us, to them, we're a number on a spreadsheet. And I think that's why I try to tell people as far as like politics are concerned. Like, I don't care about Trump. I don't care about DeSantis. I don't care about Biden, because they're all part of that club in one way or another. And they're all just looking to control the levers a little bit more differently on how to make us do what they want. And the whole thing with immigration, it's like, dude, if you die tomorrow, they're importing the people to just kind of clog your spot so they can still get their food and they can still get their things and somebody to drive them and somebody to take out their trash. And I mean, that's all they look at us at. I know it's so cliche, but I mean, the Hunger Games in one way or shape or form is kind of, I'm not saying it's a direct, window into that. It's not as extreme as it is in the book yet, but it is kind of the way that they would like it to be. That your cities, your Silicon Valleys, your Londons, all of these places are these high technology, high class, high areas of society. And then just on the outskirts, what are they? You have your poor, you have your desolate, you have people can't struggle to eat in the same zip code as people who are having like $400 dinners. And it's just that dichotomy that I know a lot of people don't want to acknowledge because it's kind of a slap in the face, but it is something that exists right now. The real conflict is not guns, it's not the environment, it's not, whatever supremacy you're talking about. It is what narrative is being crafted to, because it's more than one. For some people, it's the environment. For some people, it's race. For some people, it's this. It is to keep people separated. It is to keep people at, in the lower classes at odds with each other so the elites can kind of just do whatever they want.
Yeah, we outnumber them and they know it. For
Yeah.
sure. I do enjoy documentaries on prisons, prison life, especially in the US, but I saw one recently that was worldwide. It would go to different places around the world. And it's fascinating how diverse and different they are in some ways. The hierarchies that they have, the gang, the different gang layouts that they have, and the sort of hierarchy of power in the population, the general population of these different prisons. Some are very tightly controlled and strict. Some are very, 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 very loose to the point where it's just like this village. And the tough guys rise to the top, and the smart ones rise to the top, and then other people are happy, at different lower levels. And there's some of these prisons that actually have a religious element. And in some of I forget which country it was, probably in South America somewhere, there was a Catholic gang that, they had good intentions, and they would, they were working with the hierarchy in the church, and there were perks to belonging to the Catholic part. Like if you were good, you could gain entry to the Catholic living quarters. It was cleaner, it was better food. but you have to go to mass, you have to say your prayers, you have to do stuff like that. So I thought, this is amazing. Like, I'd like to go to that prison, you know. So that's the
Yeah.
prison I'd like to go to. It still wasn't great, but it was like, it was pretty cool. Like, you could just, you have an incentive to be good, right? Oh, were you angry with your cellmate? Were you violent? That's not good. You're going to be, you know, you're going to lose privileges for that. So I like that because it's spiritual. It's not just, because I saw other prison systems where they try to exert control just like you're an animal in a cage and we're just going to make you be good. It doesn't work. You have to have a spiritual connection to the people, right?
Hmm.
You have to
Yeah,
want, you have to
absolutely.
want to be good for goodness sake. You have to love God. And if you don't love God, if you think you're just an animal that evolved over millions of years, where's the incentive to be good? I don't get it.
You know, my wife and I were actually talking about this in another conversation this morning. The idea of free will and the fact that is lost, that God has been so gracious and merciful to us to give us free will, and we kind of take advantage of that, because when we choose with free will to glorify God, it emphasizes and just it makes it that much more glorious, because we have seen through the trappings that are around us, and instead are choosing to glorify him who gives us all of these great things. And I think that really kind of connects back to what you were talking about as far as the spiritual aspect, because we see it today. I don't know about in your societies, but we're trying to see through like tolerance and all these other, for lack of a better term, man-made virtues of acceptance, tolerance, diversity, blah blah blah. They don't work, because what are we seeing? We're seeing people more divisive. We're seeing people becoming more radicalized, whatever that term means to you. There are those things that are happening because we are not choosing to go to the unifying thing, which is the universal Catholic Church. It expands over all countries, continents, and people. Right? That's why the Catholic Church is everywhere, and that is the unifying thing, is our choice to glorify him who is greater than everything here. And I think that's one thing they've tried so hard to suppress. But it's interesting when you strip all that away, like in a prison, right? You don't have the trappings of modernity, you don't have the trappings of all these things. So it clear, for lack of a better term, it kind of clears your head, right? When the whole board's been erased and you don't have any things, you're like, okay, I am in this awful position. Now it really shows, which is why here in the States, the argument over the death penalty, we're like, actually, no, the Catholic Church is okay with it because it clears your head and you're able to confess and get yourself right with God, instead of, let's say, you're in prison for life and you're just there being your hedonistic self, not realizing when death is going to come. Hey, when you know death is going to come, you're more likely to put your affairs in line, and things become more important. So when you're in a prison system like that or anything, and your luxuries are stripped away, I mean, you go look at somebody like Job, right?
Yeah.
When everything was stripped from Job, what was the one thing he never lost? So maybe by having everything else stripped away, we realize once again, okay, I got lost in money or lost in food and all that. Now that's been taken away from me. Now, I see the error of my sin. And unfortunately, man, sometimes, because we're stupid, fallen, idiot, I mean, we're brilliant, but we're also dumb as a box of rocks at the same time. When we have those things stripped from us, we actually can figure out where we're wrong and how to make it better.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a sobering thing. It's interesting in the Bible it talks about visiting the prison, those who are in prison, and taking care of the orphan and the widow and these sorts of things. And I was talking with my previous guest about Jesus when he talked to the soldier, he gave advice to the soldier what to do. What should we do, as soldiers, what should we do now that we're Christian or whatever? And Jesus said, do your job well and within moderation. Like, don't take more than your pay, than your salary, and don't extort, and obviously don't rape and those sorts of things. So, I was asking my previous guest about this. I'll ask your opinion about it. It seems like a very, very, very status quo answer to just be a good soldier. It doesn't say anything about questioning, is this a just war? Like, what does are my general's orders in line with God's plan or whatever? Because, like, I mean, he just told the soldiers to be good soldiers and to do their duty without abusing their power. So that kind of sounds like, if you're, let's say, for example, with Ukraine, Russia, like if you're a Ukrainian soldier, Jesus says to the Ukrainian soldier, just be a just and virtuous Ukrainian soldier, and he'll turn to the Russian soldier and say the same thing, be a just and virtuous Russian soldier. Does that play out well, or is there part of the story missing from his advice to the soldier? Because you would think that he's the God man, he knows everything, so he would say, well, if you're a soldier, you should abandon the war if it's not a good war, or go get another job. But he didn't say that, right?
He is the God man, and he knows everything he says is not said out of turn. Now, of course, we being dumb, we might be not interpreting it correctly. Let me look at it this way. For the Ukrainian soldier, for the Russian soldier, if you are in the midst of this conflict on a personal level, if it's on the ground, if it's in your house, what else can you do? Can you stop being a soldier and go be a baker? Can you stop being a soldier and go be a bus driver? Maybe you can. And if you can, maybe you should get out. But the idea is, when locked, and this is my very, very ignoramus opinion, if these people are locked on a land battle and they're fighting each other, I guess be virtuous within the context of just war theory. If somebody surrenders, you take the prisoner, right? If a fortress is taken, you don't kill, or you don't go into the village. You do only what is necessary within the context of a strategy within a war. You don't be like Sherman here in these United States during the Civil War, where he burned all of the South on his way to the sea. Men, women, children, property, crops. He destroyed all of it as a way. He did total war to try and get the South to surrender. That is not just war. That is not the virtuous soldier, right? Because you are operating outside of the context of an actual conflict. So the idea being, okay, you are stuck, because remember, we also have God puts you where you are supposed to be, right? We also believe that you are supposed to be in this moment at this time. You and I are supposed to be speaking right now. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, that's because, God wills it, those things. So you could also say, hey, God put you as a soldier in that conflict. So it is up to you to act virtuous in there. Now, maybe you'll run into an order that you're like, I can't do that. I can't do that order because it justifies. What they're going to do, they're either going to put you in the brig or going to put a bullet in your head, or whatever the case may be. That's also a test of your will, right? Your free will. You need to be a virtuous soldier. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means if you understand the teachings of the church, you will understand what it means to be a good and virtuous soldier. And so when you ask me that, that's kind of just literally off the top of my head what I think.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, I'm picturing it, the world being transformed one soldier at a time, one teacher at a time, one politician at a time. Just accept your role, do your role with virtue, and be a man, or right? If you're a woman, be a woman.
Right. Yeah. Just don't switch. Don't switch in between.
I'm a woman on Tuesdays and Fridays, but
the war started, so now I am a female, and I will be be a housewife. Yeah. That is my virtuous duty.
Mr. Mom. There you go. So, you bring to mind one of my favorite topics recently, and my listeners will get sick of me asking my guests about it, but I want to hear your opinion, because you have a lot of good opinions. It has to do with the fact that there were Aboriginal people here, native people here when the Europeans came. And I'm reading a book which glorifies the role of the church and the welcome that was given by the native peoples here. It's amazing, mind-boggling. I've never, ever encountered this. I'm hoping it's not fake news and just propaganda that's promoting a good image of the church, because it's so beautiful. It's the biography of Father de Smet. And it's amazing. It just brings tears to my eyes how welcome the Catholic Church is here, and how they were willing to convert, and they love God, and they were thanking the church for showing them the light and bringing them baptism, which saves, and so on and so forth. So I want to get your perspective on the whole native thing, and why is it that God ordained or allowed the Europeans to come and to convert the native people? I understand the conversion part, but what I don't understand is like the role of the government, like the evil government trying to push the natives west and kill the buffalo, and the church was against that. So the church was on the side of the people that were being abused by the government. That's the impression I'm getting. But there's also the question, the left sort of would paint the picture very differently, where they would say the church is oppressing and forcing the religion down the throats of these people that had their own beautiful traditions and the sorts of things. Can you just give me your perspective to sort of clarify all that mess?
So the reason, I'll try to parcel these out one at a time. The reason why the Europeans were allowed to come and convert is because it was for the glory of God, that all nations be converted. Now, as far as the native mythology or myth that they were just a bunch of peace pipe smoking, beautiful people who never did anything wrong. When the Pilgrims landed in Massachusetts, one of the first tribes to make friends with them, one of the reasons why is because they're like, hey, what's that? And the Pilgrims are like, oh, this is a gun and it shoots bullets. And like, hey, can we have those so we can go use it on the other tribe that we don't like around here? True story. One of the things they did is they traded crops for guns. Secondly, the fact is when they talk about you're standing on conquered land or whatever they like to say, the natives have been conquering each other since they had been here. The Comanche and I don't even know all of them, but some of them were the Cherokee, and they were just violent nomads who would just conquer and kill and do everything possible to their adversaries. You could even say the reason that they were converted is because they didn't have ideas like mercy, and they didn't have concepts like taking prisoners. They didn't take prisoners. They scalped you and they killed you. Like they weren't going to be like, oh, now son, we go back to fire and eat. No, they weren't like that. They were like, you're my enemy. I'm gonna scalp your head and use you as a trophy. And so, the only thing that has, and I'm sure you know this, the only thing that built Western civilization was Catholicism. So I always love telling people that, oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, whatever communist, leftist person, you're standing on the shoulders of Catholicism. The only reason you're allowed to spit your awful opinion is because the Catholic Church came and civilized these areas and built these areas out. Because if you look at places that don't have Catholicism, they're still not operating in the best of ways. And so I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but I think the idea is that the natives were not, and I had leftist professors I've worked with who were like, yeah, no, the whole myth of the natives is just propaganda for people. It's propaganda to make white suburban soccer moms in these United States feel bad about themselves even more because they just have a death wish and they just want to feel bad about everything and they have such guilt. So it's just another way for them to feed that guilt and to paint this picture that, oh, well, obviously what we did was wrong, even though if we were not here, the Native Americans would still be raping and pillaging and scalping each other because that's what they've done. And the concepts of like their big sky and all these other things, it's a lot of it's been embellished through Westerns and things of that nature. So now, don't get me wrong, the United States treatment of them, even to this day, is despicable. It is despicable. If you look at reservations, they are impoverished areas that have kind of been left to their own ways. I really love watching films like Wind River. There's a film out there called Wind River. If you've ever seen it, I highly recommend. It's brutal to watch, but it is a fantastic movie. There's a TV show called Longmire, where a sheriff in Montana or Wyoming, he has to deal with part of his his county has a Native American population on, and he has to interact with them, and you get backstories. I think those films talk about the inhumane treatment and the setbacks that have been laid at the feet of Native American populations because of the despicable way of the U.S. government. But that's a U.S. government issue. That's not a Catholic issue.
For sure, yeah. This book I'm reading really makes a clear distinction, and it really glorifies the church. I hope it's true, and my hunch is that it's true because the church is one with Christ.
Well, if everybody else hates it, then it is.
Yeah. So, I want to tie together this idea of the green movement and then the Native Americans and then the civilizing factor of Christianity. Okay, because the people that buy into the doomsday green thing, like we have to, little mom and pop, we have to recycle or the world's going to end or whatever. Like, I don't buy that, first of all. But I mean, if you did buy like we have to stop polluting, we have to stop consuming, we have to stop the carbon, whatever. And hey, if you pay a carbon tax, that actually helps the environment. How does it do that? I have no idea. But anyway, there's this idea of, hey, are we going to, as a population, global population, are we all going to become hunter-gatherers and live that romantic, noble, savage life of just like going and hunting and gathering? Because short of doing that, short of reverting to that, it's just a joke. It's just a joke to say that I recycled, the 16 overpackaged products that I bought from the supermarket today. That's a joke. That's just a joke. And we know that the powerful people at the top of the pyramid, their carbon footprint is, without exaggeration, thousands of times bigger than my carbon footprint. Okay? Greta Thunberg's carbon footprint is thousands of times bigger than mine.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I don't have a car. I bike everywhere. It's like I don't eat a lot of meat, whatever. It's like, and I don't even buy into the whole thing about meat. My wife is vegetarian, and she thinks it's outrageous that the government's pressuring people to eat crickets and to stop eating meat. So she's pushing for like, hey, we should be allowed to eat meat, but she doesn't eat meat.
She's gonna go out and spear a buffalo. Is that what you're gonna tell me? Just to spite them?
But the question I have is, does anyone take this movement seriously, where we're actually going to start simplifying our lifestyle? And the other side of the coin with this question is like the civilizing thing about Christianity. We have hospitals, we have schools, we have technology, we have science, we have all these things, but they all have a carbon footprint or whatever. So I mean, I don't buy the carbon thing at all to begin with. But pollution is a real thing. I know that you have a factory with gross chemicals going into the waterway, and then the family down the river, they get sick and they die and their children are deformed. Like, that's real, right? So there are problems to be solved, but do we have to go all the way back to hunter-gatherer thing like the noble savages apparently did? Or what do we do? Like, what's the deal? Because I'd like us to stop pretending that these so-called solutions are actually solutions. Like, electric cars are not going to help the environment. Sorry.
You actually have to drive 60,000 or over 50,000 miles before you actually get to a neutral carbon footprint on an electric car, because of all of the work that had to go into getting the lithium and then transporting it to the factory and then building it. So people don't realize that your electric car has caused more pollution before you've driven it. And those are some statistics like, hey man, you got to drive this thing 50,000 miles before it even gets to neutral. And people don't know that. But I agree with you. I agree with you that, chemicals in factories and things like that, I'm okay at a state level regulating that to figure out a way to clean the water out and do that all kind of stuff, because we all suffer from it if we don't. And then kind of what I was saying before, the idea of these big government programs that will fix the environment. It's just a class system. It's just a wealth transfer. It's just ways from people to take money from poorer people and put it in the hands of corporations that have your solution. Oh, well, I have this thing that will fix the environment. It doesn't fix the environment. It just, it sits there. And we all know that recycling is a joke, because when you recycle stuff, you figure out, oh, they just put it on a boat and they send it to a third world country half the time. And if you look at the shores of India, and if you look at the shores of some of these places, China is throwing up more coal-fired power plants than any other country in the world as we speak. They don't give a rip about the Green New Deals or your your G8 Green Accords. Or India doesn't care. I know there's this thing that the Saudis are trying to do, like the 9 line or whatever that is. Have you heard about that? Where
No.
they're trying to build this entire um society, and it's just going to be one straight line, and it's going to be like 6 layers deep, and it's going to be all carbon powered. That's just for publicity purposes. But a lot of countries don't pay attention. The only ones that are paying attention are like European countries and North America, are dumb enough to try and implement this kind of stuff. But the whole idea of environmentalism is much like anything else. It's been co-opted by those who seek more power. And I think at a local level, your local community, my local community, we could figure out, all right, this thing's polluting. We got to come up with a solution to whether that's like a separate reservoir for the chemicals, and then do like a special thing where you put in a new, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not
Practical
a numbers
solutions.
guy.
Practical
Yeah, you
solutions.
can come up with them at the local level. That's the only way. And for me, because we have different states, state level would be the highest I would go to try and fix something like that.
Yeah, well,
Wouldn't count on anything else.
the Catholic principle of subsidiarity is a very valuable
Yep, right there.
principle for everything, family life, whatever.
It's amazing, like the actual church teachings work. Shocking, right?
Yeah. We used to hear in the news cycle, even though I hate the news, I try not to follow, but on my radar came that East Palestine train spill with the chemicals and all that. And then the story went away, but I wonder, like, is it all cleaned up and fixed, or it's not newsworthy because we've already heard it, or what's the deal?
Not newsworthy anymore. We haven't seen any, even the outlets I follow, nobody's really covered it because there hasn't been, and also, a lot of people are like, well, that community is just done. That community is destroyed.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. I mean, the property values are gone. There's a lot of chemical seepage in the ground in those areas, like in the houses and stuff like that.
How many homes are affected? Like thousands of homes?
I mean, most of them that are in East Palestine have been affected one way or another, because when they burned it and then they had the rainfall and they had all the chemicals in the air, it's going to be one of those areas that's kind of just forgotten about for a long time, and until East Palestine was never really on anybody's radar anyway. It was a lower class community, and that's another reason why nobody cares, is because it's just a bunch of poor people. So if they all die out, like we were talking about before, that really doesn't bother anybody. So the fact is that we haven't really heard anything about it. It was a huge story, and that just kind of goes to the current thing, the current news cycle. It was a good story. Now it's gone because we're chasing other things.
Yeah, it's so sad, so tragic. But like Christ in the New Testament, we just stay focused on, my kingdom is not of this world, my kingdom's in the other world. And, it's hard. It really is hard not to get caught up in the worldliness of the world, right? It's really, really hard to just say, no, I'm going to suffer. I'm going to die. I'm going to strive for virtue. I'll be martyred. Like your project with the fake martyrdom, or the faux martyrdom, or the pseudo martyrdom. I think it's an excellent project because we need to get in the habit.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's
The gentleman Jason who came up with it's a brilliant concept, because one key factor that we have lost is the ability to suffer. Look at the cough. Everybody when there was the slightest bit of potential suffering,
oh my god,
that was laid upon us, what did we do? We instituted every single modernity solution possible. And newsflash, people still got it. People still died. People still suffered. Instead of embracing it and saying, how can we, mitigate through this crisis? We did all the worst things you could do, because what did we not want? We didn't want to suffer, and we didn't want to have to go through any trying times. And so it's definitely something that a lot more people should get in the mindset, like you just said, the mindset of it.
I've never experienced white guilt. I've never been embarrassed to be a white First Nation man, but during the so-called pandemic, I was so embarrassed to be a Western white man. Because why? Because there's a child dying of starvation literally every 7 seconds. But that's not newsworthy, and we're not going to get all together and try to figure that out, right? We're not going to figure that out. We have to figure out why the white man has the sniffles. That's top priority for the world. That's top
everybody
priority.
else. Yep.
Screw the children who are dying. Screw the people that don't have clean water. There are people, there are Native Americans or whatever they're called here in Canada that don't have clean drinking water. Like they're on reservations and the government's not providing them with potable, drinkable water. That's
Yep.
not a priority? Like what?
No, because it wasn't catchy. It wasn't the current thing. It wasn't the
Oh
thing
my
that
God.
that was just kind of like, once again, classist ideology. Stupid natives, whatever. We'll use them when we can use them as a placard against the Catholic Church, or when we find these graves or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
outside of that, outside of their usefulness, they can literally all die. That's on like most governments, mine, yours. They die, that's one less person we got to feed, or one less person we got to worry about housing, or
Have
one
you
less.
heard about MAID, the medical assistance in dying we have up here in Canada? It's like
Yeah, that's impressive.
suicide light.
Well, I mean, they do it in places like Oregon too. They have the what is it called, the dying with dignity.
Oh yeah.
The idea is that, and it's just mind blowing. It is just mind blowing whether you guys up there or here, people embracing not the suffering. Like my mom, when she got cancer and she went on hospice, she accepted the dignity of death, and she suffered the pain that went through it. She wasn't like, kill me now, put me down like a puppy because of something. But the fact that people are coward, and honestly, I'm sorry if this offends, you're a coward if you do it. You're an absolute coward if you're like, I don't want to suffer anymore, so just take me out like old Yeller. No, you're not. Your time's not up until God tells you. Now, if that means you got to suffer a little bit more, where some people have the dignity of a quick death, and some people got to suffer long term. And I'm telling you, my friend, when I talked about all the things I did in my early 20s and stuff like that, if I and I may sound righteous, please, folks, don't think I am. If I get the chance to suffer even a little bit before I die and get to offer that even that small price in the chance to offer it up for this the awful blasphemous things I've done in my life, if I get even a tiny chance, that is an absolute blessing. And the fact is, we're too comfortable, we're too fat, and we don't look at it that way because we look at it through the lens of modernity.
Give me suffering or give me death. I think that's one of the saints said that. A lot of the saints talk about this, and it's what we need to learn. Just we need to meditate on the cross. I got myself a nice big crucifix here, and that's
Yeah, I wish
that's
I could turn. I got my Mary statue, I got my cross here, I got my little home altar right there.
nice.
I got my sleepy Saint Joseph because he's my favorite. This is actually I can show this, my favorite thing. You won't be able to see it, but it's a
What?
relic, Saint Joseph's relic oil, touched to a
Oh,
relic of the cloak of Saint Joseph. So that's
oh,
like, because he's my patron saint, even though he
no
wasn't.
way.
When I reverted, I took Saint Joseph as my patron. So he's with me. I can talk to him all the time, and he's my
Nice.
guy. So yep,
Yeah.
I got all my stuff too, man. And the
You
more
should
I
come
can
to
get,
Montreal. You should definitely come to Montreal because Saint Brother Andre Basset, he built a great oratory to Saint Joseph here. You have to come and see it sometime.
I'd love to. Yep, I'd love to go back to Montreal
Oh, so you've been
and
here.
yeah, but I was 18 and I went for a very specific and awful reason. I think
Different reasons. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there are
there's a
other
certain section of town that you guys are known for that I unfortunately visited when I was younger.
Oh, okay. Say no more. Yeah, but it's a beautiful thing. But that St. Joseph's Oratory, it's a wonderful place,
Yep.
but it also happens to be the corrupt place that I was thrown out of for not having my certain
Good.
treatment.
Of course. Of course. Yeah,
Ah.
Saint Joseph wouldn't have had any of that. The funny thing is, he wouldn't have taken any of that nonsense.
Yeah, not even Saint Brother Andre. An edgy little guy. But no, it's wonderful. The saints that we have, the devotions that we have, the confraternities, the rosary, everything that we have. These we can arm ourselves. It's the fullness of Christianity, and all of the means of salvation are here. And when I speak with my non-Catholic brothers and sisters that are Christian, I want them to get excited about all the stuff that you and I are excited about. But it's hard. It really is hard. Like they know we're excited. They know we're excited, but they think that we're excited about idolatry, right?
On that note, so I had a friend of mine down here make this rosary for me, and some of you are gonna love it or you're gonna gasp. So this is the top piece. This was from
Oh,
Italy, and each of the Our Fathers are
oh.
bullets. This is my armed Catholic rosary that was made for me, and some
Oh,
people
wow.
some people absolutely aghast in horror when they see it. They think I am right next to Luther when they see these when they see my rosary made out of bullets. And so you're right. It is kind of funny when you show people stuff like that.
Amazing. So listen,
Yeah. It's definitely been called that in the past.
it's cool. I have no problem with guns because I'm Canadian. When I think of a gun, I think about hunting or
Yeah.
and
Yep.
self-defense. I mean, I'm up here in Canada. We're aware of the culture down there and how violent it is and how dangerous. And so, like, I mean, it is your duty to protect your vulnerable members of your family and whatnot. And it just makes sense. And not to mention the tyranny of governments. We have to have some remedy against the tyranny of governments, right? Like, I mean, that's very obvious, I think, today in
Well, unfortunately,
2023.
I think you guys are experiencing that a little bit more than we're not far behind. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie, we're not far behind, but we're watching what you guys, your Castro light prime minister is doing up there, and I've seen the pictures. I've seen the pictures. I get the rumor, but
You're
it's
supposed to focus on his ankles, okay? The socks, the colorful
are they in
socks.
black? Are they painted black or no?
Yeah.
But
So,
we're watching you guys because it's crazy to see how people don't believe me when I say when things go bad, they go bad quickly.
yeah.
Everybody thinks, it's a slow burn, the frog and the boiling water. And to an extent, that's true. But societal changes, rapid changes, momentum shifts, they don't happen in a matter of weeks. They happen in a matter of days. And then you feel the reverberation over the weeks and the months. But, when you see what's happening to you guys and how, Canada is such a beautiful, amazing place. And to see what just a small group of corrupt, awful individuals can do to such an amazing, great I'm just going to keep repeating such our neighbor, right? Our
Yeah.
one of our close neighbor, somebody we share a lot of values with, you guys up there, and to see what you guys are going through, it's heartbreaking.
Well, did you feel proud of the truckers and the people on the overpasses when they did the Freedom
Oh yeah,
Convoy?
I was pumped for you guys because you guys were able to do something that us Americans were not able to do. You guys were able to make an actual impact and do some things, and we couldn't. They tried some stupid trucker convoy down here, and we were all like, yeah, that's a Fed operation.
Oh, really? Yeah, well,
Yeah.
one of the problems down there is it's very big. Like you have a lot of population, it's a lot of
Yeah.
geography. It's not really the same thing. I was amazed, I was amazed. It's the first time, I can honestly say it's the first time in my entire life that I was proud to be Canadian. I had tears in my eyes watching the based patriots on the overpasses. And these are regular people. These aren't, some kind of low IQ, like meatheads. These are people with families and like, good Christian people. And some of the people I'm sure were not even Christian, but they have values. They have family values.
Yep.
Like, I mean, it's like, and they care about the truth, they care about justice, and they care about freedom. And it's like, it was very, very exciting. It was a very exciting time. The February, what was it, February 2022 or whenever it was. I actually went to Ottawa and we, danced around with the music and all the bouncy
That's awesome.
castles and all the
That's such a
flags.
Canadian thing to have a bouncy castle at like a protest.
Just
Oh, you
love,
guys, you
just
guys are so
love and
great.
friendliness. Just like there's
Yeah.
good vibes. Good
Yeah.
vibes. Very good vibes. So I don't know why they tried to demonize it. And people on the opposing worldview or whatever, the leftoids or whatever they are, they seem to sincerely hate us, and they think that we're like, terrorists or racist or sexist or whatever. Like, I mean, it's weird, the psychology of it, like the ability to manipulate people with a really lame narrative. It just seems like it's too easy. It's too easy to manipulate people. And like you were talking about at the outset of this conversation, there's just the divide and conquer thing and set up the opposition, black versus white and whatever. It just seems like it's too easy, right?
And that's the effect of a generation or two of people who gave total trust to the government and government schools and all of these things where we put our trust in the people who are supposed to lead us instead of, and I know I'll sound like a broken record, instead of men leading their families. And then you got involved in the 60s movement where everything needed to be progressed and everything needed to change. And yeah, it's very strange how we sat back and we watched, once again, your country and my country, to a small group of people in different strategic areas take those places over and then convince children, because that's who they needed to go after, the most impressionable and the most vulnerable. They weren't trying to kill them in the womb. They were trying to convince them that everything that they were being brought up in was bad. And they played the long game so they could have this societal change that seems like it could happen in an instant. A great example, once again, talking to my wife about this: how does everything seem like in corporate culture? How do all these corporations now seem to be so woke? Well, they started with this thing they created in the 70s called an MBA program. How long have we existed without a master's in business administration? We had corporations, we had people with companies, and then all of a sudden we needed a master's in business administration. And because I watched my wife get one. And in these classes, she would talk to me about, like, look at this question, or this lady was talking about this weird example. They put in these progressive ideologies, they sprinkled them in, and then these people with these NBAs, where did they go? They went to this new department that was popping up in a lot of businesses called human resources, which companies had never really had human resources departments, because they kind of just either they were able to manage things. Each manager was able to manage their own teams and all this other stuff. But now you had this department that was kind of above everything else. And it sounds so nice. Oh, human resources. And then they put those people from those MBA programs into those human resource departments. And once again, small group of people, 15, 20, 25 people in a department that now have such a huge impact on a whole corporation through policies, through new terms, through handling complaints. It doesn't take a lot of people. It just takes a group of dedicated people. And who used to be the dedicated people trying to make society work? That was Catholics and Catholic families and Catholic parishes. Those were the small groups that used to dominate and shift and steer society. But once those fell apart, something had to fill the vacuum. And that's what we're seeing now through the education system and through corporate culture, because now everybody has to work, right? Everybody has to work because everybody has to afford the things, and everybody has to be able to live, especially with inflation. I got to keep a roof over your head and all this other kind of stuff. And so now that they've ripped the family dynamic apart, it's been replaced with the corporate family, right? Where everybody's like, oh, I love working. They're like my family. No, shut up. I don't want to hear that. So, you can have friends at work, right? You can have acquaintances at work. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there are so many people that don't have a family structure that they have to rely on that corporate culture as almost a family. And when you have to live in that family, you got to abide by their rules. And their rules come from where? Their rules come from a place like human resource.
Absolutely. As you're speaking, it's all good stuff, but it's reminding me of the Old Testament and how God allowed or ordained foreign nations to take control and to exile the Jews, and the scattering and the remnant, and just all the pain and suffering of being ruled over, and a lot of suffering. Because God told them, He's like, do you want me to be your king, or do you want to have your own king? They're like, we want our own king like the nations. It's like, it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing.
Yep. It is. It is absolute in that way. And unfortunately, here in the States, I can speak for you guys, but we have adopted such a level, and I could speak to this on this Catholic podcast, such a level of Protestantism that we're like, oh, I'm a good person, I'm going to go to heaven, right? Heaven is for everybody. Now we've adapted the mindset that heaven is just for everybody, right? Pay your taxes, be a good person, go to church on Sundays. You put a flag on the back of your car or whatever the case may be, vote for the right politician. I hate air quotes, by the way, so I apologize every time I do them.
Yeah. Sorry, I've been using them.
I just hate them. But you vote for the right politician, and your seat in heaven is assured.
Yeah, well, the we have so much I have so much to dig into here, but I think I have to go because my wife is calling me. But when it comes to Protestants, I've got someone I know very well who assures me that they're, when they die, they're going to go to heaven, straight to heaven, right?
Great.
Straight
Yep.
to heaven,
Yeah.
straight to
Yeah.
heaven.
Expressway, man. No layovers, right? Nonstop flight.
Yeah. And it's disturbing, it's troubling, it's very troubling. One of my guests sent me a link to a book that I bought up from a Kindle for like $5 or whatever, and it's about how few are saved, how few are saved. And I haven't read it yet, but I've read enough of the saints to know what the saints say about the relative populations of heaven and hell, and it's not too cheery. And the path is narrow, and the highway to hell is broad and very pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we
Yeah.
have to that's why we have to strive for virtue, like St. Paul was striving. And I always point this out to my Protestant friends. St. Paul was striving lest he fall. Like, I mean, we're not assured salvation, and it's scary. It's really dangerous. It's a dangerous life. That's why I like your martyrdom practice idea, because the four last things we have to prepare. I'm thinking about my death every day. I mean, I have been
Funny
for
enough, I have lately as well. For some reason, it's just very been much on my mind. It's very strange that you mentioned that, because that's been kind of something that's, I'm not obsessing over it, but
yeah.
it's definitely popping up.
Yeah, it's something I think that we should keep in mind. A lot of the saints talk about this, to prepare. I just read recently in the daily missal thing that I get in the mail, they have little saint quotes from saints, and one of them was, uh, "Do now what you would like to have done when you die." So, like, the basic idea is when you're about to die, and you're looking back on this moment, you have lots of options in this moment. You could do the selfish thing, or you could do the the hard thing. Do the hard thing, because when you're on death's door, you're going to look back on this moment and you're going to wish you did the hard thing.
Yep. Yep. And we are the best at procrastinating, aren't we? Yeah, I'll do it. I'll start that tomorrow. I'll start that diet tomorrow, or I'll start that book tomorrow, or I'll start my novena tomorrow, or I'll start doing the rosaries tomorrow, or you know what? I might go to confession tomorrow. Or
Mm-hmm.
it's such a comforting phrase, isn't it? I'll do it tomorrow, because you almost assure, oh yeah, I'll do it, but you don't have the responsibility of actually doing it.
Yeah, and tomorrow's so busy. That's a thing.
Yep. And then all of a sudden, then it's, oh, I'll get to it this week.
Yeah.
A week turns to a month, and eventually it never happens.
One thing that I found very interesting in my spiritual battle with the demons, because they do love toying with me. Um, I did my first 5 Saturdays devotion. Finally, I got that over with, but it took me years to finally do it.
Mm-hmm.
And but as I was trying to complete it, there were a lot of obstacles. One of which was at St. Joseph's Oratory when they threw me out, and I had to restart because they broke my five Saturdays devotion. But there were other obstacles. But finally, I think I got it done. I'm pretty sure I got it done. I'm never quite sure because it's just so chaotic when I try to do that devotion. But anyway, at the same time when I completed that, hopefully, I started another thing, which is spiritual journal. So I keep track of what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, and if I'm doing venial sin, I have different categories for the 10 Commandments for venial sins and stuff like that. And so, and if I do good things like go to mass, go to confession, I keep note of it. Spiritual reading, praying, whatever. I just keep note. I have a color coded numeric system, and I just keep track. So it's just ironic that when I started these good intentions, like these good resolutions, I was like really under demonic attack, and I was really suffering in my practices, and I haven't really been as good of a Catholic, sorry for the air quotes, but I haven't been as good of a Catholic, since I've tried to implement this. Like the whole reason to do it is to try to be a better Catholic. But the irony is it's been the opposite. It's just been harder. It's been harder. And I think this is the way the struggle for virtue is, right? It's not like you're on flat ground now. okay, so I'm going to walk a little faster, I'm going to jog or whatever, because the terrain will change. Like as soon as you set your mindset, like, hey, I'm going to do something for God, and then suddenly it's like jagged rocks and sharks jumping out of the water at you. You know what I mean?
The first thing I can, as somebody who struggles with the same things that you are when you're trying to be wary of the sin of doubt, and that's for me when I'm under spiritual attack, that's one of the easiest ones that can be turned against me, is to doubt, if because once you start clouding yourself and you're separating yourself from God, the more with anxiety, the more with doubt and fear, all these things, you know, lead us, cast your worry upon him, cast your doubt upon him, cast your fears upon him, because that's, he's there to crush all that, and he dispels all that. And that's something that I learned recently, very recently, because like you, I'm like, oh, I'm just not good enough. I'm part Irish, so
Yeah.
I have more than enough guilt for you and me combined. And I can easily tell you everything I've done wrong in the midst of this conversation we've had and since we've started.
Yeah, those
So
damn air quotes, man. You're going to
yeah,
hell. You're going to hell for those. Kidding, kidding.
so but I agree with you. I'm with you 100%, brother. That happens. And the phrase, when you're over the target on a bombing run, that's where you get the most anti-aircraft fire, right? When you're getting over the target, that's when you get the most
Black.
strife and the most bullets over you. So in a way, you're like, okay, it's time to double down, because if I'm really experiencing this right now, that means I'm making him nervous. I'm making our adversary nervous, and that means I'm doing what God wants, and it's time to just push through, grab the rosary, talk to Saint Joseph, invoke your guardian angel.
Yeah.
We have, like you said it before, we have all these gifts. We have all these gifts that God has given us to fight this spiritual warfare. And unfortunately, a lot of times, especially men, are like, I can do it on my own, right? I can do it because I'm a man and I'm tough and I can push through. And that's pride. That is pride. And he loves it when it's like, oh, you think you can do it yourself? Perfect. Perfect. Instead of humility, right? Humility is the ultimate thing that can get us out. It's like, all right, I'm struggling right now. I'm throwing all this upon you, Lord, because right now I'm out. I need you more than ever. And through that weakness, right? Have you heard through our weakness he makes us strong? I'm sure. I know I'm messing it up, but essentially to that effect. We are only strongest when we're at our weakness, that's when we truly, kind of like the prison example,
Mhm.
right? When we're at our weakest, when things feel like,
Mhm.
I'm awful today. It's like, well, God's love is infinite. Our Lord and Savior's love is infinite, and they're there. The Holy Mother's there. We have all these. We have the Church triumphant in heaven. Your saint that you can find that struggled through the thing that you have struggled with. Right. No matter what it is, we have an answer. We have a saint. We have a novena. We have a prayer. We have the things, and we're told, like, no, you don't have them. You don't have this. You're alone. You have nobody. And it's like, nope. We can absolutely rally around it. But I hear you when we're doing devotions, or when I'm reading My Imitation of Christ, which if you really want to punch in the face, read My Imitation of Christ, and it'll.
Yeah. There's a line in there that stuck with me for I don't know how many years since I read that. The line is, it was all full of good stuff, but the line that stuck with me is he was talking about the godless and how the godless are working harder for death than we Catholics are for life. That's embarrassing. That is
Yeah.
embarrassing. Think about the people, they're losing their time, their energy, they're sweating, they're bleeding for what? For power, for money, for fame, for position, for status. And I'm just laying back, kind of, yeah, I hope, I hope I can, yeah, I hope God, like, well, God's good. He likes me, right? Yeah, he likes me. He's good. And I'm good. And I'm a creature of God. It's just total wimp. Like, and Satan's minions are working hard, and Satan
Yeah.
and his demons, they don't sleep.
Never do.
And
They
I'm
never
just, I'm
do.
just looking for my next meal. Like when I'm at mass, I have to just like slap myself because I'm always thinking, what's my next meal? Like, what's it going to be? What am I going to eat? How delicious is it going to be?
Yep.
You know, I'm at mass and I'm not thinking about the Eucharist. I'm not thinking about Christ. I'm thinking about like the pleasure
Oh,
of food.
I'm terrible. I'm terrible about that. And I'm thinking, I'm like, should we have waffles for breakfast or should I go get donuts? And it's just like, oh, he's the host. It's right there. Yeah, I'm with you, man. Of course, I have, my ADD brain. It's 1,000 miles. I mean, I got like 4 hamsters running at the same time, except one's running backwards and the other 3 are running forward. So it's just,
Well, there was a
it,
saint, there was a cheerful saint. I think he was a monk or something. It doesn't really matter, but the principle is very good. He remained cheerful even when he fell and sinned, and his friends asked him like, "How do you do it?" And he just said, "Well, because I already know what I am, and God already knows what I am, and I know what God is. And so when I do silly things or sins or whatever, I just turn to God cheerfully and I say, look, if you don't help me, if you don't give me grace, this is what I do,
mhm.
right? I don't want
Yeah.
to. I don't want to do this, because this is me, right? All this gross stuff, all this sin, whatever, selfishness, indulgence. That's me. That's what I am. I don't need to be nervous about it. I don't need to hide it. I don't need to like whitewash it. That's reality. That's the real. That's what I am. But Christ is not that. Christ is virtuous. Christ is holy. Christ is good. Christ is selfless. Christ is humble.
Yeah.
Amazingly, he's God, but he's humble. I'm a creature, but I'm proud.
Yes. Yep. We have that faculty where we want to be the best and we want to be the funniest or the most intelligent or the most dominant or whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, it's part of our stupid fallen nature that we are tempted back into it, which is why the greatest virtue, fasting is great, almsgiving is amazing, all these other things. Devil doesn't eat. Devil doesn't need money. But the one, and that's why he hates our beautiful Holy Mother, is she is the pinnacle of just beautiful humility. I mean, I know we could get off on another topic, but yeah, one of the phrases I love to use is, the phrase that she said, your will be done, right? A lot of times I'm like, I'm the handmaid of the Lord, your will be done. And that's a way to get through it a lot of times when it's like, okay, this is not happening. Whatever, earlier this year, I went through some really difficult times. And the only way to get through it was to literally say to myself, where do you want me? God, where am I supposed to be? Because obviously I don't know what's going on right now. And, it's led to some really good things. But the idea of just not trying to, because, as men, we try to control and be like, all
Yeah,
right, this is our plan and we're going to do this. And
yeah.
da, 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 instead of saying, all right, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Please let my stupid self not trip over and get in the way of where you want me to be.
I was listening and enjoying all of that, but I'm stuck on what you said about Mary being the pinnacle of, well, I would use the word the pinnacle of lowliness. It's like the height of lowliness. It's like
Oh, yeah.
it's a beautiful image. It's like the height of lowliness, but everything you said was beautiful there. Everything you said was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it didn't come. I mean, she's the pinnacle of humility,
Yeah,
right?
I
She's
know, but I'm just
yeah,
thinking about it's because it's so counterintuitive. The first will be last, the last will be first, and those who
oh yeah,
exalt themselves will be humbled and whatever. But it's like it's true. Like I mean, it's just like she's the height of lowliness. Like that's the only way to be raised up by God is to lower yourself, and it's just so paradoxical for us because we're always striving, like you said, with our project and my spiritual journal and my devotions and this and that and did my prayers and whatever. And it's like God doesn't, God's not accumulating all the points like a check mark, check, 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 check.
great job. You did 3 rosaries today. That's 10 points. Like no,
That's not how it works.
no.
Just like I always talk about it's a relationship and it's a romantic relationship. So how do you please even your human spouse in this human world on this human dimension? How do you please them? It's not by being fake and having a fake external like checklist, right? That's not how you do it. The way you do it is you pay attention, you listen to them, you cater to their needs, you love them with self-sacrificial, self-giving, complete self mutual self-giving, blah 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 blah. right? It's
Yeah,
like,
Corinthians, the Corinthians one. That's what it is.
uh, but we want to, we want to have a, not me, 'cause I'm happily married for 27 years, but the young kids today, they want to get the Tinder profile and they want to get this and that.
There's so many young Catholic men who are just, they want, and then once again, this is a whole different conversation for a whole nother time. Has technology has destroyed that family dynamic, not even with men with the Tinder, but allowing women to, and this will get me in trouble, but to indulge their own the trait of vanity,
Oh
where
God. Oh God.
18 to 20-year-old women can pull in six
Ooh.
figures for
Ooh.
doing awful things. And how does a male, because the old school dynamic was male and female come together. Female creates the home and she raises children and she complements the man who goes out and he provides and protects and defends. How does an 18 to 19-year-old man go to a girl who is exposing herself to the internet and making six figures a year? What does he provide to that relationship? Technology has removed the necessity of man, and that's one of the things that has destroyed that lower level. And of course, men are not, they are complicit as well by indulging
Yeah,
the women on these platforms and giving them the money, because
of
somebody's got to
course.
pay them. And any
Of
other
course.
women, yeah, the men are doing it as well. But that whole dynamic of just the destruction of that basic thing that God has created, like man and woman together, you complement, it's beautiful. This is what the women provide, and that's why God has given them these gifts, and this is how men provide, and this is how God gives them these gifts, and it works together. And technology, satanic technology, whatever you want to come, has just said, nope, you women don't need it. Men, you don't need to find a woman because you can get your lower faculties taken care of right here. And women, you don't need a man because you can be provided all the things sit there. And it's just, yeah, it's bad.
Wow, wow. Sometimes I thank God. Well, I thank God every day, but in particular for the fact that I grew up. I'm older than you. I'm 53 years old, and I met my wife in the early 90s. Like in real life, I met her in real life at a bar. You know what I mean? Old school. Like you walk up to a person in a bar and talk to them. You know what I mean? Like,
Right? Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then 27 years married, we're happily, we're in love, and we don't have any children, but we're happily married and we're best friends. And it's like I don't know how the kids do it today, and I sound like an out of touch guy, like a generation gap or whatever, but I think our concerns are legitimate. I think our concerns are legitimate for what technology is doing to alienate people, and just the education, in terms of metaphysics and religion and stuff. It's just not there. It's not there.
Nope.
Even the science, even the grasp of science. Like I studied science, I studied physics, I've worked in physics, and people today, they don't understand the first thing about natural science. They think it's some kind of like priest class. This priest class in the sciences, the experts, and they do their magic, and they don't understand. Even if
Nope.
they have some grasp of the math and the actual training that goes into the education system today, I know that it's a superficial education, but I was, reading supplementary stuff with philosophy and whatever, so I understood metaphysics a little bit when I studied physics, so I could, distinguish hogwash philosophy from the actual hard science. But a lot of people today can't make that distinction. They just swallow hook, line, and sinker a bunch of garbage that's packaged as science. And there's some science in there, but it's 1% of the content of this popular best-selling book. You know what I mean? It's a lot of
Yeah.
nonsense. People are not grounded. They're not grounded in Aristotelian or Thomistic thought at all.
No, they need a nation of idiots. They need a country of and I say idiots in the most loving manner, because they were never taught the things that they desire. They were just spoon fed enough for them to be good little robots.
Yeah, I mean, when I was studying, I was disappointed with the education I got in the early 90s. I was disappointed because I found it was too much like geared towards the workforce. Like, okay, we're going to just get you into the workforce, and that's the last thing I wanted. Like I didn't want to work. You know what I mean? It's the last thing I wanted. I just wanted to
Yeah.
like have fun and to explore the fundamental the nature of reality. And that's why I studied physics. But it turns out it just like they want worker bees and whatever. So
Oh,
it's
that's their whole desire, is to make subservient population that's incapable of free will and exercising free will and free thought, and because we're given all these gifts, and instead you're made to go to your little, your routine of work home, work home, work home, and that's it. You live your life for the government, and the more they can get you into that, the less you live your life for God.
Absolutely. We all worship something. And so,
Yes.
I was atheist for 25 years, so I can't look down my nose at anyone who's lost their way, but by the grace of God, I came back, and you came back, and luckily
Still coming.
luckily
Still.
we didn't run into each other here in Montreal when you came to town that one time.
Yeah, that would have been bad. That would have been bad, man.
I don't know if you know, but I was an atheistic Satanist just before my conversion back to God, so.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. You were probably in a better place than I was, because I was still taking the body and blood, man. I was doing that ultimate blasphemy of being that lukewarm, awful Catholic, where I was blaspheming our Lord by doing these awful things and then still receiving him. So
I was desecrating Catholic graveyards. So
all right, well, I don't think it's a contest.
Anyway, so I hope you come back, and it's been a real joy and a pleasure meeting you. And you're very different. You're very different from Fawaz, but I think you complement each other. You complement.
Oh, Fawaz, that's because Fawaz is smart. Fawaz is smart and funny and intelligent and good looking and charismatic, and I am me.
You're all those things.
Oh, please, you don't have to lie. It's a sin.
So great meeting you. It's been a real pleasure, and it took a while to connect, but I'm glad that you came on, and I hope you come back again, okay? Because I got a lot more questions for you.
Absolutely, my friend. I'm sorry it took so long. Oh, it was a lot of fun. If you guys will have me back, I'll be back.
Of course, and I enroll all my guests in a perpetual mass, right? So you're going to get the graces, extra graces each and every day to the end of time.
Well, that's why I did it.
So please, in exchange, please pray for me and my family.
Yes.
And there's lots of we need the prayers, because the family's under attack, right, in this fallen world.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I will, my friend.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll talk very soon, and I'll probably see you on Twitter, okay?
You will.
All right, my brother. We'll talk soon.
Love you too.
Bye.
God bless.
Bye.